Welcome back to the Sales Gravy Podcast, this Wisdom Wednesday where you drive the agenda. Because on this segment of the Sales Gravy Podcast, you bring your biggest sales challenges and Jeb Blount delivers his best answers. And those answers, they come straight from the trenches. Because Jeb's not just teaching sales, he's out there prospecting, closing, and leading sales teams every single day. We've got Sales Gravy Live coming to Atlanta, Georgia with a Fanatical Prospecting Bootcamp on September 16th and 17th and November 18th and 19th of this year. And these are 2 days of pure prospecting mastery that will help transform the way you build pipeline forever. But look, these tickets always sell out fast, really fast. So go to salesgravy.com/live. That's salesgravy.com/live. And for $100 off, thank you for listening to the podcast. Use the code POD100. That's code POD100 for $100 off at checkout at salesgravy.com/live. All right, let's take that next caller.
All right, next up on the show is Kirk Roberts from Richmond, Virginia. Kurt, what you got going on?
Yeah, so my challenge is I really struggle with interrupting people. So one of my, I kind of commonly run into the fact that I feel like I'm interrupted by low quality salespeople or salespeople who just aren't all that great, or maybe like don't want to accept the fact that I'm a bad prospect. That's irritating to me, and I have trouble getting over like the head trash of thinking, like, despite never having been told to like pound sand or be hung up on or anything like that, that, you know, whenever I'm calling someone, I'm just interrupting them, and this like personal aversion to interruption.
Okay.
It's just like a mental block.
So just to help me understand, is there a difference between interrupting people and what you have to say is relevant to them, or interrupting people with complete irrelevance? Or is it just interrupting?
So I think for me, I think of it as just interrupting, but
Okay.
I think you've probably made a good differentiation between there's interruption that's painful and there's interruption that is not painful.
Yeah. Let me give you an example, because I'm in your boat. I get irritated with salespeople who interrupt my day, whether it's on email or by phone or a voicemail, rare, but when that happens, or on LinkedIn, when the message is completely irrelevant. I would think that you could probably agree with me that I'm pretty much out there. Like, it's not like I'm some executive that is in a building that you've never met before that you wouldn't know anything about. You can pretty much Google me and you're going to be able to find me, or put me in Chat GPT and it'll give you a background. And you would know that I'm the CEO of Sales Gravy. I've written now 17 books, going on 18. And if you wanted to connect with me in a relevant way with your product, you could do like 5 seconds of research and come in with a proposition that I would pay attention to. Would that be fair?
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I would say that 99% of the prospecting interactions that I have are completely irrelevant. It is a person who is clueless. They don't know anything about me. And a great example of this is even big like software companies like Gong. I've got a Gong rep who is persistent. And, it's one of those things where they've found a local number. So they're calling me from a local number, which I also find irritating because I'm like, I know you're not local. So why don't you just call it like it is and call me from San Francisco? I know who you are.
Yeah, it's disingenuous.
But the rep itself, her message is just completely generic. It's not connected to who I am. It's not connected to who we are. I don't think it's an AI. So I think it's a real person. She's left me a couple of voicemails and sent a couple of emails. And there's enough variations in there that it feels pretty much that it's human. But you'd think after like all of that persistence, the person would step back and create a message that would get my attention. Because I don't really mind the interruption as much as I mind the interruption that is a complete waste of my time. Again, it's not like I'm sitting in the bowels of some organization and it's hard to find anything else about me. It's like, what I do. So could you at least connect the dots between what is it you're doing and I'm doing? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
No,
let's
100%.
let's take a look at those things. So one is, if it's just interruption that's bothering you, then I get that, and that's called projection, right? You are projecting your own values on other people. Now, I don't do that, and I don't do that as a rule. So I have no problem interrupting people, but I do know that if I'm going to interrupt, I'm going to get a better result if I'm relevant. I don't like being interrupted. Nobody likes being interrupted. But I know that for my sales success, for my income, that I have to interrupt people, or as I say in the book, you're going to have skinny kids, right? You're not going to get
Uh,
the income. So I don't allow that to happen. Now, the reason that you're in this situation where it's happening to you, so I want you to understand this, it's not completely your fault. If you go to Sales EQ, a book that I wrote after fanatical prospecting, I talk about the empathy scale. And on the empathy scale, there are, say, 10 spots on the empathy scale. At the very far end, there's sociopaths on one side. And on the other side, there are hyper empathic people who cry in the presence of trees. Somewhere in the middle are where most salespeople are. So there are some salespeople who are like, I would say, threes and fours, and I'm probably a three. And threes and fours, a sociopath would be a one, a three or a four is going to be self centered and more outcome driven. So we're less likely to, before making a phone call, go, I wonder how Kurt's going to feel about this. I don't really like being interrupted. I don't want to be too pushy. I don't want to say those things. We're just going to interrupt. And I suspect that the young lady who's calling me from Gong, for example, I suspect that she's probably in that boat. Like she has no problem interrupting. I mean, she's doing a pretty good job of being persistent. Her message stinks. As much as I want to reward her effort for coming to me, at least she's called me twice, which is so rare. I'm not rewarding someone who just comes to me with a generic message who didn't take even a moment to understand what the pitch is. The pitch is just it's terrible. Like I literally could sit down with Gong's marketing and sales team and walk them through how to change that in about 2 seconds that would get them better results with calls like that. But I don't have a problem with that. You're probably a 6 or a 7, which means that you have a higher level of empathy. So when you're sitting with people, your first thought in your mind is, how are they going to feel? Which, if you think about empathy, it's your ability to step into their shoes. That's why you end up projecting. You step into their shoes and go, I wouldn't want to be interrupted, so I don't feel comfortable interrupting them. And that causes you in your heart, like as you're about to make a phone call, you go, I don't want to be too pushy here. And it makes you feel bad. So you just quit doing it. And it also causes a level of cognitive dissonance, which means that, you're struggling with, I want to be a person who's empathetic to the feelings of other people and I care about them and I listen to them, but I also have to be an interrupter. And those two things tend to be at the opposite ends of the spectrum. So this is a mental game that you're playing right here between your ears. And the key here is understanding that projecting is the most dangerous thing in sales. It is dangerous for salespeople because you're deciding for your customer in advance what they want to buy, which is the opposite of empathy, right? You're making that call. How do you know that interrupting them that day isn't the most important thing in their life? I mean, it happens. I buy things all the time from people who interrupt me because they called me with the right message at the right time. And I was so happy they were there because I was looking anyway and I needed something and they showed up at my doorstep. So think about it that way, right? And I can't fix that for you. I can explain it to you. You have to choose to understand it. But that projection it's just a mind game. It is you making the decision for someone else. So step out of that frame and say, I have to interrupt people in order to help people. And the empathy side of you, the part of you that cares about people, is what makes you such a great salesperson. That empathy is a meta skill in the sales space. Once you bring someone in and you start working with them, like they love you. They fall in love with you. You feel great about what you're doing. You feel good about helping them and working through their problems with them. But to have that opportunity, you have to do the hard work of getting their attention, and they're not going to like it because nobody likes to be interrupted. Okay, that's first problem. Now, the second problem is if we step into, I don't like being interrupted by people who are irrelevant. That's fair because I don't think that if you think about the people that you're reaching out to, they probably don't want to be interrupted. But if they're gonna be interrupted, they would prefer to be interrupted fast, prefer to be interrupted in a succinct way, and they would prefer that whatever you're saying is relevant to their situation. So what that tells us is that, let's take this example of Gong, that rep from Gong, if that rep from Gong would grab some time, they're calling a C-level executive. We're not calling a mid-level person in an organization. You're only going to get one or two shots. It might be incumbent on you to do a little bit of research to understand where you might fit in my world that would cause me to say, okay, let me hear what you have to say. Let's talk. You want to do the same thing. Now, there's two ways that you can build messaging that will be relevant. So, Kirk, one way is personalized. Now, that personalized messaging, when you send in your notes, you work in a really niche world.
Yeah, high paying, unbelievably niche, and also generally the people that I happen to be talking to are already really well qualified,
Yeah.
generally because it's like a bidding situation or
Okay, good.
something like that.
So there's two ways you can go. One is completely personalized. So completely personalized message means that you're taking time in advance of your outreach to research the person and develop specific messaging. So fanatical prospecting, a book call statement, right? You're developing specific messaging for them. Whether that messaging is by phone or email or LinkedIn, one of those places that messaging is specific for them. That takes a little bit more time, but on the other hand, that will help you make those calls because if you make that investment to do that work, you're not going to allow yourself to squander the time that you invested in it by not actually making the call. So that may be one road you want to take. And that's especially true if the higher you get up in an organization, the more personalized you want to be. And the smaller group of prospects that you have to work with, the more personalized you want to be. The other type of communication or messaging that you might want to consider is targeted messaging. And for the folks that are listening to this, I break both of these down in greater detail in my book, Virtual Selling. So if you want to get into these concepts of targeted versus personal, you'll find it there. But with targeted messaging, what you're doing is you're creating messaging that connects with most people on your list, but it's not a guarantee it will connect with all people on your list. So this is not generic. It is taking a specific group of roles or verticals or problems or geography or something that that list shares in common. And it's building a message that you feel like would connect with the majority of those people and be relevant. And you'll know really quickly whether it's relevant because if you make 25 outbound calls and get your head handed to you on 25 of them, or you leave voicemails or emails, you don't get anything, you'll know, hey, this messaging is not connecting. I need to make an adjustment in that messaging. Or if you get someone on the phone and you start listening to the objections, you're like, okay, this isn't perfect. Let's go back and let's build into that. And those two things will help you at least create something that's relevant, which I agree with you wholeheartedly. In your world, especially in a niche world, you need to come in and you need to say something that's going to have them think, okay, I didn't like being interrupted, but Kurt's got a point here and I probably need to pay more attention. And I think you'll get better results. I think that will connect with who you are. You're a high empathy human being. That will make it feel better. And if you do that investment, it's going to be harder for you to let yourself off the hook. If you've done the work up front, you can at least say, look, I earned the right to interrupt them because I at least took the time to try to understand them and try to craft messages that are going to be relevant. And by the way, down the road, you're going to get better outcomes. Now, the last thing on this, building all that messaging is a lot harder than just going out and generically interrupting people, which means that you're going to have to block time to build the messaging ahead of your prospecting block. Building messaging is not prospecting. Research is not prospecting. Prospecting is prospecting. So make sure that you schedule time to build out those messages as you work through your list, think through who your list is going to be or who you're going to be calling. Over time, if you do that more often, it'll get easier and easier and easier because like the motion will just start to feel normal. But I think those two things combined with getting past the head game that you're playing with yourself, which is natural. It's not your fault. It's just who you are. I think those things will help you get more prospecting done with better outcomes and feel better about yourself at the end of the day. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Is just thinking about because I don't like to waste my own time either. So thinking about it from the perspective of okay, like I spent this time preparing, so I need to be efficient and make sure that I
Yeah.
capitalize on that little kind of tiny little investment. But yeah, and then just recognizing the fact that it's like people generally they're super receptive to what I have to say
Yeah.
because I'm so focused on making sure that it's relevant.
Yeah.
And just being like, look, if that's the most common like if 99.9% of the time that's been the reaction, like
Yes.
why let this, this fraction of a percentage turn into like all this head trash that doesn't do anything for
Yeah.
me. No,
It's clear your mind. Do you play golf by any chance?
I don't. A mountain bike. I don't
Okay.
know that.
Well, even if you don't play golf, I'm going to give you a recommendation for a book. And it's a golfing book, okay? But I want you to read it like a sales book. Do you know who Mike Weinberg is?
I don't.
Okay,
No.
well, Weinberg's a good friend of mine.
I'll write
He
down
wrote a
his
book
name
called
now.
New Sales Simplified, which is a book I'd probably add to Fanatical Prospecting. Those two books go very well together. And Mike sent me this book. It's called Putting Out of Your Mind. The author's last name is Rotella. The whole book is about how when you're hitting a putt, like hitting a putt's like prospecting, right? You're sitting there, you're staring at the hole, you're nervous, if you miss it, you're gonna miss a stroke, and all of the stuff, the head trash, everything is in your head, and you end up missing a lot of putts because you're just overthinking it.
I mean, I can relate to that playing mini golf,
Yeah,
I guess. So,
exactly.
yeah.
So probably mountain biking. Like if you start thinking too much about mountain biking, you're going to crash and burn.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, you end up running into the tree you're trying to avoid.
Exactly. So it's the same thing with horseback riding, anything. Like if you're thinking about it, you're probably going to crash and burn. This book has made like a massive difference. Mike said it made a massive difference with him, made a massive difference with me. And I started reading it. And I'm telling you, it's one of the greatest sales books I've ever read. If you just take golf out of it and you pay attention to what he's saying, he's a golf psychologist. Highly recommend. I think it might help you deal with the head trash that's getting in your way before you make the call.
Yeah, sweet. No, I'll put them on. I'll put them on my list. I appreciate that.
Love that. Awesome, Kirk. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Sales Gravy podcast. Appreciate you.
If you've got a question for the show, go to salesgravy.com/ask. That's salesgravy.com/ask and submit the form. One of our producers will reach out to you and schedule your session with Jeb. All right, so let's wrap this thing up. Kirk's struggle reveals one of the most dangerous paradoxes in professional selling. The very empathy that makes you great at closing is the same empathy that can paralyze you from prospecting. This isn't a character flaw. It's a feature of high-performing salespeople that needs to be managed, not eliminated. Think about where you fall on the empathy scale. If you are a 6 or 7 like Kirk, your natural inclination is to step into your prospect's shoes before you even dial their number. You're thinking, I wouldn't want to be interrupted. So you hesitate, you overthink, and eventually you avoid the call altogether. Meanwhile, the 3s and 4s on the scale, they're dialing with zero hesitation because they're not projecting their own preferences onto their prospects. But here's the paradigm shift that changes everything. Your empathy isn't the problem. Your projection is. When you decide in advance that someone doesn't want to hear from you, you're not being empathetic. You're being presumptuous. You're robbing them of the choice to say yes or no to something that might actually help them. The solution isn't to become callous. It's to channel that empathy into preparation. Do the research, craft the relevant message, earn the right to interrupt by making that interruption valuable. Because when you've invested time understanding their world, their challenges, and their needs, you're not just interrupting, you're delivering a potential solution at exactly the right moment. Remember this, every deal you ever closed started with an interruption. Every client relationship you value began when someone broke through the noise and got someone else's attention. Your job isn't to avoid interrupting, it's to interrupt intelligently. And when you're staring down at your final call block, tired, frustrated, and ready to call it a day, remember this. Push through the resistance, hold the line, and make one more call. This is Jeb Blount Jr., and we'll catch you next time on the Sales Gravy Podcast.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.